everybody, and welcome to another episode of Design Cinema. This is Feng Zhu speaking, and this is episode 84. So now for this episode, I want to do things a little bit different. I'm going to do a lot more casual as a conversation basically between you and I. I'll be sitting in my office and you guys are sitting across, and we're just going to discuss and talk about design. We're going to talk about the process of design and how we go about it. And I'm calling this episode Designing to Spec, drawing towards an industry portfolio. I am recording this in real time. You can see I just drew a little red line right there. And I won't be doing much sketching or drawing this episode. This is mostly a lecture type of episode. Hopefully that's going to help some of you guys. There will be some drawings toward the end of this episode, but mostly it's going to be just me talking, and hopefully that's okay with you guys, and you could be listening along as you paint and draw. You don't really have to pay attention to the screen that much. Not yet. When I have some stuff up, you guys can take a look. But otherwise, let's just keep it very casual. That makes it also easier for me to record as well. I don't have to pre-prep a bunch of stuff in my head. I'm just gonna talk. Now I have written down a bunch of stuff that I will start to reveal to you guys on the layers here. But let's set this up. Why am I doing this episode? Well, the reason is because in the last about 16 years or so teaching, right? I started in 1999 over at Associate of Arts in Sherman Oaks, California. Taught there, went to Noman, and eventually went to Art Center, and now of course teaching my own school. So I've seen, hopefully, that gives you a little bit of experience. I've seen thousands of student portfolios, graduating portfolios, and you can follow up and see, okay, which of these students gets a job, which of those doesn't, and you can start getting an average of, okay, this type of portfolio with this type of content gets student work versus this type of portfolio and content doesn't. Now, it's not a universal rule, but there's definitely a certain trend, and majority of that has come down to, you guessed it, design, right? So, which is right here. This is what our industry is all about. Sometimes there are portfolios out there that exhibit a lot more art type of stuff than design. Now, there's nothing wrong with art, and I'm about to discuss that with you guys. But ultimately, it's about, do you want to work in the industry professionally? Are you building a professional portfolio? Or is it something you're just doing casually for fun? You do need to tend to focus a little bit about, okay, making a portfolio so it's suitable for job applications. So let's jump start into this real quick. So I'm gonna try on some layers. Again, I'll be doing some notes and stuff in the red pen here, but majority of this is typed out. So let's just start with drawing for yourself. Okay, this is what, if you're learning at home, you're very young, you're starting to see this industry is being exposed to it, and you're starting to sketch. And there are some benefits to that, so let's go through that real quick. One of which is you're having fun. That's very important. I mentioned that many times before in the past. You're drawing, you're having a lot of fun with it, and you totally get into it. That's step one, because if you're not having fun drawing, then forget it. You know what I'm saying? Because what's the point of doing this job? So, and by drawing a lot, well, you're building a lot of experience and you're building mileage. And on top of that is confidence, which I didn't write out here. The more you do something, the more confident you're gonna get doing that. And that's all very, very important in building yourself into a professional. And some other advantage, you could draw whatever you want, right? When you're drawing for yourself, there's no restrictions, no one's telling you what to do. So if you want to draw giant alien spaceships on a foreign planet, go ahead. If you want to do a bunch of zombies running around, go ahead. There's no restrictions. You can draw whatever you want. And that sometimes adds back to having fun, okay? And related to that is that it can be very flashy. Because you're drawing whatever you want, you could tend to do things that are very trendy. You could do things like some movie just came out and you're kind of doing something that's kind of similar, maybe just very flash explosions, epic lighting, epic vistas, and so forth. And that stuff is all there to be fun. And of course, if you do that, you could impress your friends very easily. They'll look at this stuff and go, man, this is awesome, man. The painting is epic and it's really cool. So, but there are some downsides to that. Now, it's not a total negative. And again, I'm talking through my own personal experience of just seeing the thousands of portfolios that are out there. On top of teaching, I also have a design studio in which we get work with various designers, and therefore we also have the experience of seeing what type of portfolios do our clients respond to, right? Talking about from the biggest AAAs to small indie companies and stuff. What do they look for? What do they want? So this episode is really towards from my point of view, so it's not universal, but hopefully it helps you guys. So when I say here as in terms of a negative, it's not a pure negative, but here are just things to be concerned about, and see maybe you'll fall into this category as well. One of which is that if you're drawing for yourself, it tends to be generic, very, very simple specs, generic themes such as a very alien landscape with a lot of spikes on it, and there's some tower, for example, and that could be fantasy or sci-fi. Just alien landscape, very foreign. It's not this earth, and it has spiky things on it. So these are things you see a lot. Or say a scantily clad female, barely wearing any clothes and just sitting in the forest or something like that. It's like it's cool looking. It's a beautiful piece of art, but it might not be solving anything. It's just doing a piece of art. So that's something we see quite a bit. Usually lack real world settings, which I just mentioned above. It's some kind of alien world or some kind of fantastic fantasy world. It's not grounded in, for example, real world armor and things like that. It's perhaps inspired by that, but it generally takes place in a very imaginary world and not real world. And that, on top of that, lacks difficult design solutions. For example, it's a sexy girl sitting in the forest. There are some designs, of course, to that, but the solution is not difficult. For example, if the client, again, I'll mention this later on as we go forward. But for example, the client's like, well, this character, her parents were killed in the war, so she's got this look in her eyes, and we really want to capture that. And that adds difficult design solutions. Or like, she has to fight without any kind of modern military weapons. She's kind of homemaking some of her weapons from the stuff she finds. This adds a layer of difficulty that gets quite tricky, and we'll get into that later. So another thing we see is that the drawing comes first and the design comes second. Again, this is from my personal observation. If you've been looking at some of our younger students who start drawing, they just start drawing. The design with the bigger picture is not in their mind yet. They're just focusing on the drawing. And hold on, let me take a sip of drink here. Now, when they start drawing, then they'll start figuring out design, because that's totally understandable. I was a student at one time as well, and the drawing part is very important for someone who's learning, because you want your drawing to look good. And if the drawing don't look good, what's the point of design? And I totally understand that. However, that does lead to the problems that I listed above, in which you're drawing first, so therefore you're not coming up with a design solution at first. And as the drawing gets better, the design takes a hit. It takes a generic hit, and even though the rendering will come out very good, the actual solution itself might not be. And this goes back to some of the stuff I talked or mentioned in a previous episode of looking at an NBA basketball player. The dribbling ball part is the drawing. For us, it's the same analogy. Every basketball player could dribble balls. So when a recruiter is looking for someone to play for their team, they're not going to ask the question of, can you dribble a basketball? That is already assumed. That is something that you have to know how to do. Otherwise, what's the point of even being on the court? So dribbling basketball is the same thing for us, drawing, right? It's about, what do you do with that skill? What do you do with that dribbling skills? How do you play the game? How do you work with your teammates? What are you doing to assess the situation, adopt the situation, and use the ball dribbling to do all that for you? So for us, it's the same thing. Drawing, even though it's a very sexy thing and rendering is all very, very important, it's just a tool. What we actually are aiming for is design. Okay, and this is the thing that, because if you start drawing first and do this second, this takes a hit, even though in the industry we need this first. Okay, let me just check the time real quick. All right, 8 minutes in. So because this is a casual talking episode, I have no idea how long this could run for. I am doing this in real time right now, so I'm gonna guess it's gonna go for an hour, perhaps even a bit over as well, and hopefully that's okay with you guys. All right, so next one is gonna be another thing we see a lot, or I see a lot, so I don't want to put we here. Muscle memory. Basically what that means is that the same themes gets repeated over and over. If an artist, because using drawing first, gets very comfortable with a certain theme, they tend to repeat that over and over. So it's like, okay, I draw, say, mechs or something like that. I drew one that's really successful, that builds a lot of confidence, I'm gonna draw another one. And that builds confidence, I'm gonna draw another one. Again, nothing wrong with that. It just gets into some repetitive designs. Like the entire portfolio is like, oh, that's great mech. Oh, that's great mech too. Oh, it's another mech. Oh, it's another one. Oh, it's another one. Now, can you get a job doing mech doing that? Probably, but it does limit you to a certain degree depending on the kind of studio you go to. All right, so next one is some of the concept art from people who are learning, for example, tends to sometimes look like fan art of existing concept art. So it's not fan art per se in the terms of like you're drawing Ryu or Chun-Li from Street Fighter, but it is almost like another take of somebody else's concept art. So it's like, oh, this looks kind of like the concept art from The Last of Us from Naughty Dog, but it's not exactly, but it kind of looks like one. So you get a little bit of that versus injecting your own design solution. So like, what if you had to do a game that's same kind of story or similar story to The Last of Us, but you cannot copy or emulate what Naughty Dog did? That then is your own take on it versus a sort of a fan art of their stuff. Another thing which is related to all of this stuff here above is that the subject matter tend to be quite young in terms of age. The kind of themes, for example, very violent stuff, or sexy girls sitting on a rock or something like that. These are things that are very fun. They're fun to look at. I enjoy looking at those kind of things as well. But it is not something we do a lot in the real world. It just doesn't come along, and we'll get to that in the second panel here. And the last one, of course, that when you put all this together, generally it doesn't tend to impress art directors, and art directors are the ones hiring you guys for the jobs. So when you send this kind of portfolio in, even though it could be filled with gorgeous artwork, nothing returns, no phone calls, no emails to offer you the jobs. Again, not universal. I want to make it very clear, this is not a black or white situation I'm talking about here. It is very gray, but I'm doing this from an overall picture, and hopefully you guys can understand that. So don't go out in comments like, well, I had a friend who just draws sexy girls and got a beautiful job. You can, of course you can. It just depends on what you're working at. This is from a more generalist point of view of helping you build an industry portfolio. All right, so let's turn on the other side here, which is drawing for an industry portfolio, okay, versus drawing for yourself. So what are some of the pros for this, right? One is you're designing with heavy restrictions. Then that's what this episode is going to cover later on as we progress here, is that you give yourself some very strict guidelines, and you're designing, let's move on to here, for those guidelines. In this case, we're going to make up a imaginary client and design for that client. And you're not doing it for yourself. Even though you're having a lot of fun, your ultimate goal is like, have I addressed my client's needs, not your own needs? And have I basically followed the restrictions that you have set forth for yourself? When you start to do this, this is what the real job of what we do actually is, because we're not working for ourselves. So when you work in the concept field, you're working for somebody else. You're working for directors, you're working for game studios, and they have a certain need. And it is your job to meet those needs of your clients and not meet your own needs. You can't change the specs. If they give you very locked restrictions, you have to stick with that, okay? Next is good reading comprehension skills. When you're working with studios, especially nowadays with these AAA games and stuff, the design spec we get into our studios are massive. I mean, recently last week, we signed on to a project, and the PDF was, I think it was like 35 pages or something, massive PDF, and that's just one of them. They sent a ton of these, and these are the lores, the backstories, the canon, everything that goes with this IP, and they want to make sure as a concept artist, they're basically handing over a baby of theirs that has certain traits and certain ways they want this baby to be raised. They're giving that to you, go read all these carefully, and this is how you take care of our little baby. If you don't have good reading comprehension skills, go, screw it, I'm not going to read this PDF, I'm just going to do whatever I want with this IP. Well, they're not going to be working with you very long, because that's the same thing as giving it to a babysitter and you tell them that you have to feed your baby by 8 o'clock, and they're like, whatever, I'm just going to feed it whenever I want. Well, that's not going to work, because to these studios, the IPs they're developing is their baby. It is worth a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of investment. And when they hand it to you, since you're one of the first ones in line to take care of their baby, they want to make sure that you totally understand the scope and the vision of what they're trying to do. So having good reading comprehension skills is important, and later I'll show you guys, share some techniques of developing that. All right, next is understand subject matter, right? This is related to the reading comprehension skills. Excuse me, let me take another sip of water here. I'll be doing a lot of talking, so I'll be drinking a lot of water. So understanding is important, right? Can you comprehend what they're trying to tell you? Are you really paying attention to what they're trying to get to with their design spec? If they mention this and this and this, are you going, okay, I see, this is what they're trying to do. Next, excuse me here, I'm really getting my throat here. Let me take one more drink. All right, use of real world references, something that I mentioned over here as a negative. By doing so, most of the project we get in our studio today, and even the stuff that you see out there being released, right? Look at all the games that just got announced for E3. A lot of them take place in the real world setting, right? Look at the Tom Clancy Wildlands, I think, or what's it, Just Cause 4, I think, or Metal Gear Solid. You're looking at Fallout is not, right? Fallout 4 is not, but it's still grounded to a 50s-like type of real world. It's not an alien landscape per se. So there's a lot of real world projects out there. So when you work with that restriction, it helps sometimes for your portfolio. Next is managing different design approaches. This we'll get to a little bit later. Basically, when you're designing, you have to think, okay, how do I plan this out? How do I offer the clients different type of solutions to this problem, and not just one solution? And every single solution come up with is valid, hopefully. Managing patience. This goes back to doing some of this stuff, the real world and reading comprehension, because before you even start sketching, you have to basically detail your project out. And once you start these projects, they can be very, very difficult. So you have to have a lot of patience to see these projects through, because not all projects are fun, which you can probably see down here. They're work. Okay, that's why this is a job. You have fun most of the time, but sometimes these projects are very demanding, they're very tricky, the clients are giving you very difficult specs, and you have to have a lot of patience to see this project through and not leave the project or get pissed off and those type of stuff. As a result of all this, your subject matter tends to be quite mature. You are designing solutions. These solutions tend not to be your first pass generic type stuff. They have a lot more meanings behind it, so therefore the subject automatically matures. You try to keep it professional and presentation wise, so that way everything looks really nice. And one of the biggest benefit of doing drawing for a portfolio is that it's going to impress art directors, and those are the guys going to be hiring you. They're going to ones looking out for artists to bring into the studios, right? They have the most pull in the studio, because other concept artists could recommend you and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately it goes to art director or creative art director to make that decision of pulling a new talent into the studio or giving them a freelance gig. So very, very important to do that. So some of the negatives to this, right? Not everything's all positive. Let me scroll down a bit here. Is that yes, sometimes it is not fun. Okay, it's work after all. We are making a living from this, and it'll be ideal if every single project that we get on are epic landscapes and epic explosions and epic spaceships flying in low atmosphere. Unfortunately, it is not the case. Sometimes you do have to design the little room, and if you look left, there's a little jar, and look right, there's a table. This is work, and it is not fun, it is not epic, but it has to be done, right? For those who play video games out there, you might have seen some of the epic paintings and stuff, but when you actually play the game, you are walking around at a human scale, and you have to see things at a human level. When you walk into a little inn, you're seeing tables and bar people and drinks and stuff. Well, somebody's laying that stuff out, and that somebody is you, right? Someone has to do that work. So, and therefore it is not sexy sometimes, right? And this is important, especially for those who are getting this business perhaps just for the sake of having a nice presence on social media. The real concept art out there, we're not doing this for likes on social media. It's not sexy, it is just work. So when you're not doing things that are epic and flashy, you might post this stuff and nobody cares for it, right? Except for people in the industry. And you have to accept that fact that you're not doing this for personal fame and whatever, these kind of things that follows it. All of us, when we got into this business in the 90s, there was no social media. There wasn't even barely an internet present. There was really nowhere to even show your work. But it doesn't matter to us. None of us cared. We got into this business because we want to make cool games and we want to work on cool films. That's it. The artwork, you see it or don't see it, doesn't really matter to us. And of course, related to that is that the art that you do might not be trendy. You might be asked to do a bedroom of a little girl, for example, in a game. Say The Last of Us or something like that. You have to design the daughter's bedroom and the daughter's bathrooms and her closet and stuff like that. It's not sexy, it's not trendy, but it has to be done. It is a job that you will be handed to, and you can't be like, screw it, man, this is just I don't want to do a little girl's bedroom, that's boring. Well, guess what? If you have that kind of attitude, it's going to be pretty hard to sustain your longevity in this industry. All right, so next I'm going to talk about the stages of design. Let's see, let's turn that on. Bonk. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through these stages with you. Okay, we're going to go through all 10 of them actually and demonstrate to you how those things work. All right, let me check on time here. All right, 18 minutes in, we're pretty okay. All right, so number one, we're going to pick ourselves a design problem, and we're going to pick it from books, old movies, or games, something like that. Gives yourself a guide versus designing in the blind, which I put up here, right? Where you're drawing whatever you want. Don't draw whatever you want. Give yourself a restriction. So we're going to start from there. We're going to try to understand. Whoops, I just numbered wrong. This should be number 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, close enough. That should be 2. Okay, understand the client needs, which is once you've chosen your property, what is it that the clients will want from this IP? Why are they developing this? What's the purpose for it? And then once you understand that, you understand the subject matter. What is this about? How we're going to approach design? We're going to write out some possible solutions and keywords. Okay, and then we're going to do some research and gather references. And notice from step 1 to step 5, there are no drawings at all. We're not even picking up a pen to draw at all. We're only thinking and developing the idea. And that's so important in the core of what goes on behind the scenes, is that design, again, is not about the drawing. Design is about the solution. Design could be actually achieved with words. It could be achieved with 3D sculptures. It could be achieved with simulations. It doesn't necessarily have to be art. In the business we're in, art is one of the easiest ways to get it in. It's fast, it's quick, but that is not what we get paid to do. Our job is to solve problems. So therefore, if you look at the grand scheme of things, you're doing a lot of this versus the drawing part, right? Once you have that, let me put a little line here. Let me put some division lines here. Right? Then we actually get to the drawing phase. This is where your art skills kick in, right? Let's go back up here for over here, right? The drawing first, design second. Well, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to reverse that. We're designing first and we're going to draw second. So we have the solution before we even attempt to start it. So here is the design part. We write that in, design, and here is the solution, right? In which you're using your and drawing. Using artistic skills to get that stuff out. So we're gonna start some really rough thumbnails, and I'll do that in real time with you guys. There's gonna be quite a bit. I don't know how many I can do, but I'll try to draw a few in real time and keep them really loose. And then we're gonna pick a few design directions, but these ones I'm not gonna do because that takes a long time, and you can look at the other episodes. Once we get this, you could look at the previous episodes on how we actually finish those, but we'll show you some examples. And then define the look and feel. We need to do this as well. Actually, step 8 and step 8 belongs a little bit over here as well, which is what is the mood of the product we're trying to achieve. We're going to refine the design, apply story-driven details. This is important. Okay, the type of details they're adding, how does that pertain to your particular IP or intellectual property? Not random detail added for the sake of adding details. And again, I'll go through some of the examples to show you how details are added to help drive the story. Okay, which is really, really important story-driven details. And then we use art skills to make everything look nice. Okay, so let me take a quick break, or at least stop my recording so we don't lose all the stuff we've done so far, and I'll be right back to continue this episode. All right, let's continue here. So we have discussed a little bit about let's see, I just came back from a 1 minute break from recording, so let me just refresh myself as well. Talked about drawing for yourself versus drawing for an industry portfolio, and the various stages of design in which we're about to cover now. All right, so let's turn this on. Let's give ourselves a design spec. Okay, this is all pretend, so we can use this as an example of how we go forward. So client spec, and what spec stands for, by the way, is just specifications, right? That's a hard word to say. In this case, though, I'm gonna give myself 3 different clients, okay, on purpose, but they're gonna use the same location, and this location is modern day Paris, okay? The reason why I'm doing this is to show you that just because it's Paris or modern day Paris doesn't mean all your solutions become the same. By giving us 3 different clients, you'll see how we break that down to in terms of client needs and how we then proceed with the concept art. Because again, if you have a client go modern day Paris, it doesn't mean you just draw in Paris. What entertainment design really is extracting the existing elements or extracting cultural references and distilling that down to meet the end goal, which is what is the story, what is the theme, what does the client want? Because Paris itself is massive. It's a huge city with a lot of stuff in it. We cannot build 100% of everything in it. So what part of Paris do you want to capture? And what part we capture depends on the client's needs, right? So that's what entertainment does. And I think one of the best way to see that is, like, for example, if you look at a racing game, for example, like Need for Speed or something, and you play through the tracks, you'll see everything in the one run. You will see things like helicopters, you'll see like the grandstand, people waving, you'll see maybe helicopters with signs on it, the biplanes riding stuff in the sky. You'll see all this stuff. Now, granted, in a real race location, you will see all that too, but not at one point, right? You will see it throughout the day. You know, if you're lucky, you might catch the plane flying by. If you're lucky, you might see a helicopter. If you're lucky, you might see a crash or something like that, or maybe that's unlucky to see someone crash. But in any case, you're seeing a lot of stuff throughout the day, or maybe not see none of it. But in the entertainment product, you're kind of putting all that in the same location. And for a racing game, they want to stimulate your what you call it, visuals as you're going through the track, you know, over and over again to make sure it's something interesting to see. So same idea here is that just because it's modern day Paris doesn't mean we just pick any scene or any street of Paris and just draw it. Doesn't matter what clients it is. This is very, very important. So now I'm going to use this to come up with 3 different game directions that we're just going to make up. Okay, so my first one, let's just do a game called the Lone Sniper Assassin. So think of something like Hitman games plus something like Thief. Okay, so this is the kind of game, probably a third-person action game with a lot of stealth mechanics. So let's just call that our first client, right? They came up to us with that. We're making a game of Hitman meets Thief, and it's taking place in modern day Paris. Next, Sorry, I apologize for some of the noises you might hear in the background, like my hands hitting the table, because I'm talking to you guys, so it's naturally that I'm doing a little bit of hand waving, and sometimes my hands hits the table and makes a little thump noise, which I heard when I was checking the audio for the first part, but I'll try to keep that down a little bit. All right, so part 2 is another client, okay, come to you, go, we're doing a detective RPG game. Think of LA Noire plus or meets Mass Effect. Okay, it's a game in which you're running around the city solving crimes, but it has RPG elements. You're doing some shooting. You might even have some romantic interest, which you see in Mass Effect, and have a very deep character developing thing through these characters. So that's a detective RPG, right? That's client come, and you get a third client come to you, go, well, we're making a game, a mystery adventure, like a 2D or 2.5D click adventure game. Think Gabriel Knight with Indiana Jones, right? That's the kind of character and setting we want, and that also takes me modern day Paris. So imagine you got 3 of these clients, they don't know each other exists, and or they're making each other's game, right? They're all kept secret, and you get all 3 of them in your inbox requesting for some concept art, and they all say modern day Paris or setting. Well, you can't approach these in the same way because they're different games. And if we go back to the top here, excuse me, here, understanding client needs, this is the first thing we have to write down. Of if you're building an Assassin's game versus detective RPG versus a mystery adventure, what do you think the client wants to see? What part of Paris would they want you to conceptualize? Very important, right? So let's do that. Let's do it for our lone sniper assassin game as I take a sip of drink. All right. Keywords. So client needs. So I wrote down some very light words so you can see the bigger picture here. So what the client's looking for is possibly, right? And we have to take a guess here. Now, some clients will explain very well to you guys with PDFs and all this kind of. Sometimes they don't, but by reading their documents, their story, because some of these PDFs are really the backstory. It's like, you know, John Smith, whatever his name is, grew up in this part of London, moved to Paris, blah blah blah. It's mostly backstory stuff, and you have to read that and kind of digest it down and go, okay, I see. So this game is really dark. It's about hiding the shadows and stuff, and that's where the keywords come from. So in this case, I've written things like, let me put this down, possibly shadow. If it's a stealth game, you're gonna need that stuff. You're gonna need darkness. Most likely getting nighttime. We're gonna have a lot of density because you're gonna do a sniper assassination things. I can imagine making the game difficult by placing your target in a crowd, for example, and also you have to use your skills to kind of differentiate what is your target versus what is, for example, a civilian or so forth. So possibly lots of people, lots of things, high density. We probably want lots of secrets to promote the player to explore the environment, so they don't take the same route all the time. They might have to take some secret passages, you know, a la Hitman as well as Thief. Both of these IPs do that. And we probably want to give you a couple of things like height advantage. If you're using it, because we did put sniper in our title, if you're doing that, then you're probably using a high power rifle of some kind. So therefore, we want to give you a height advantage and possible long distance advantages as well. So the level needs to, or the game design, the concept art needs to reflect that. And blending in as it goes. It has to do a little bit of stealth and hidden, but how can we do that? What kind of designs can we do? Is it a thing where you're wearing disguises? Is it a thing where the color palette is all very similar so you can kind of blend into the environment? Well, that's up to us, but that's probably some of the keywords. Now, there's a lot more things than 5 typical, but using this as a example to just write some stuff down. Hold on one second as I take a sip of water. All right, so hopefully my throat won't dry up here. So with that client need in place, we can now come up with possible set design solutions. And this is all up to us. Clients, again, somehow will tell you exactly what to draw or exact location, but sometimes they don't. And in this case, I'm gonna imagine that they don't tell us the locations. They'll come to you, it's a blue sky project, they just got the overall picture, which is a lone sniper assassin, and they want you to come up with some possible settings and scenarios for the concept art. So here are some stuff I'm gonna pitch. I'm gonna say, let's do a fancy rooftop bar. Okay, somewhere in Paris, pretty cool. Got a lot of people running around and it's exposed to the elements. So therefore, I could imagine you're somewhere else and you could take a shot at whoever you want to set as your target. Perhaps along those lines, we could do some high apartment blocks, right? High up, very dense, lots of windows, and every window has people doing stuff, and you have to look for your target in that case. I thought that Charles de Gaulle Airport, quite cool, a very massive scaled industry building, and that plays in with our long distance, right? You could maybe go in the airport tower or on the runway somewhere. You have this massive few miles long or kilometers long set to do some long range sniping. Large winery could be cool. Outside of Paris, you got these huge wineries. That's a different setting. It takes it away from the industrial stuff that could help contrast us with all the industrial stuff that you see up here. And of course, if you're in Europe, maybe we put in a castle set. It would probably be pretty cool, right? Maybe something like the Versailles abandoned version. So maybe the last part of the game takes place there. So those are some of the stuff I'm pitching if I was to do the concept art for this. Now, let's look at the same approach, but now for the detective RPG. Very different game. You're no longer doing long distance shooting. You're not doing that. A lot more close. So what are those needs? Well, let's take a look. I think the client will want everyday city life, right? You are a detective in a living, breathing city. So I want to make sure that the setting feels that way, that the world has this kind of realness to it. We probably want to make the surroundings a lot more compact. As a detective, you're most likely looking for clues, and we want to make sure that the clues are not too far apart. So you're not searching, say, a scene where you have to walk 3 blocks to find something else. Most likely, the crime scene or whatever thing you're detecting is within a very close proximity to each other. It makes it a little bit easier to find things, and if you have to go somewhere else, you might have to drive your car or something like that. Again, look at LA Noire, these type of games. Probably something similar. Therefore, we have to put a lot of designs, a lot of interesting designs, and pick interesting locations that are compact. You got to meet some very interesting characters. So those characters are also placed in very interesting locations. So because a game like this, it's a lot about the story. It's about who, why, when, where, right? So characters very important, especially if you're going to build in a little bit of romantic interest that you see in games like Mass Effect. So we have to really develop that and also have a setting to enhance that type of thing. So maybe there's a restaurant you could take someone to build a relationship, or some lovely castles or something, right? These are things you have to kind of think about because that's what the clients want. And for me, in this case, I'm gonna try to make this a little bit more film noir, right? LA Noire had a little bit of that, especially in the low menu, but once you get into the game, I don't think they played up the noir stuff as much as maybe they could have, because the low menu had this whole long black shadows and really black and white look, quite cool. But so for this one, maybe we'll pitch it so it's really film noir. So we play up the black and whiteness, right? The shadow versus light, a lot of silhouette use. Just give us a mood, and that's something I'm deciding, or maybe that's what the client wants. Like, hey, look, when the screenshots of this game come out, it has a very distinct modern film noir feel to it. So that's the client needs, and those are the keywords. So therefore, as a designer, here are some of my possible solutions. We have maybe a multi-million-dollar mansion. Could be cool, very expensive. Maybe have some aristocrat living inside this place. A crime has taken place, and therefore it's a very interesting place to explore and find clues. Perhaps a interior of a restaurant during a storm, like a Michelin-star restaurant, a French restaurant, wine bottles and all these type of stuff, waiters and stuff. And it's during a heavy rainstorm, so you could play up the film noir. Perhaps a cabaret, the 1900s cabaret, or a theater such as Moulin Rouge. You got the dancing girls, you have the stage, you have this kind of over the top, almost like a 1920s or early 1900s theater. It's very neat, a lot of cool materials to play with. A classic car dealership. This plays with the whole film noir type feel. We could put some very classic 1900s cars in there, pre-World War II cars in there. Just creates a nice setting. Perhaps a player could own these cars as well, and could take the guy or the girl on dates within them as well. So it just creates an interesting place. Maybe even on board a train. And you can see the designs I'm picking here, the locations and design solutions, is very different than the one over here. This is meant to be an action, somewhat violent type of game. You're basically a military person, essentially, taking out targets as a sniper. Here, you're playing a much closer personal character, and you're seeing things a lot more up close. So we are taking these sets and adopting that to your overall IP. So let's move on to the third one, our mystery adventure game, right? A kind of click adventure type thing. So hopefully I wasn't too far from the mic. I started leaning back in my chair as I got more and more casual. Let's hope that doesn't affect the audio too much. All right, so the third one is our mystery game. What does the client want from that? Well, probably some type of learning through entertainment. I remember playing Gabriel Knight, and they mixed a lot of cool history, which I put over here, into their game, and it was kind of fun. It's not exactly real, kind of like Dan Brown books, like your Da Vinci Code and Deception Point. What else did he write? Devils and Angels, right? I quite like Dan Brown books. They're fun to read. I know they're entertainment. I know a lot of stuff in there is not true, but in a way, it's entertainment. It's not meant to be true. And I don't think Dan Brown ever mean his books to be absolute truth as well. So you take it with a grain of salt and you read these books to have fun. And I think For games like this, it's the same thing. It's almost like, oh, do you know that so and so castle is built for this reason and not exactly what you think in history. That's fun, and it's an entertainment title, fun to do. So we probably want to put in some ancient mysteries. That's the whole point of taking place, I think, in a adventure game, especially if you're in Paris. We might even be able to mix in some supernatural elements, things like ghosts and spirits, that type of thing could be quite fun. And we want you to feel like you're on a grand adventure and you're exploring, just like if you're Indiana Jones. That sense of almost like a golden era of travel, the 1920s or 30s, where explorers are going all over the world finding artifacts. But this, of course, is taking in modern place Paris, but perhaps you're going into certain locations to dig up these old artifacts. So therefore, as possible set solutions, here are my design goals. For example, the catacombs of Paris. Very cool location, not often seen in video games or even in films, for that matter, but it's a very cool location. We're talking about miles and miles and miles of skeletons stored underneath Paris. Well, for a game like this, that's perfect, but that really wouldn't work for a lone sniper assassin game. Even for detective RPG, maybe. You could kind of argue maybe, but for a game like this, it's perfect. You go in there, you're digging up some guy's skull, or digging up a lost grave somewhere that's buried within the non-touristy spot of the catacombs, right? Could be cool. Notre Dame, it's a very famous location, but perhaps we could do something where we're not in the main hall of the church itself, or maybe we're up at the rafters. And I'll show you guys a little bit. An old bookstore. We think of Paris, we think, oh, these really, really classic bookstore with thousands of books crammed in a very small area. Beautiful location for a mystery adventure game that, again, wouldn't apply to these two IPs over here. It just doesn't make that much sense. Versailles Palace, perhaps Versailles could be used in this and could be used in that, because I put this here on purpose to say that it's not absolute. Just because this set, like an old bookstore, probably doesn't work for these two, but Versailles do work, but it could also work for here. But the way we use Versailles is different. In a sniping game, Versailles could be the location of some rich guy they're trying to take out. In the detective one, it could be some guy got murdered there. And in the mystery adventure, Versailles could be more of you going to a room that hasn't been opened in the last 100 years or so and to look for something, right? And on the same vein, you have the Louvre, the big museum in Paris. Maybe you're going there to look for an artifact that's hidden, kind of like the Dan Brown books, in which you're going to look for a certain kind of, to search for clues. So I think that works really well for us. It is a museum, therefore we could actually tie in all the stuff we want to hear, such as history and mystery and ancient, all that stuff tied in. Okay, now next step here, we're gonna get into mood and look and feel. Boom, let's turn that on. And notice we haven't drawn anything, because this is not what we need to do in the beginning. We need to do the keywords, find out what the client wants, and meet the needs. And mood and look and feel is just as important. So I'm gonna start turning on some of these. For each of these, I put up a light example. Again, just 5 images. In the real world, you could possibly do tons, 40, 50 images to try to find the mood, maybe even more than that. So for this example, I'm gonna put 5. And the mood could be decided by your clients. It could also be decided by you, depending on where you're working at. So let's do the assassins one. Boom, turn it on. So it's modern day Paris, and notice my mood and look and feel is not Paris. It doesn't matter, because I'm trying to get the mood across, which is like, how does this feel? How does density feel? What is the lighting? What is the overall color palette? So I'm not gonna look for Paris for that. I just want color palettes that sets the mood. And this one, because it's essentially a murder simulator, you're killing people from long distance, I want to keep it kind of spooky and kind of dark. So, but yet at the same time, a little bit of modernness, and that's why I chose this photo. I thought this looked quite nice. It got the liveliness of the city, and it also captured density really, really well. The next is, I think, some kind of protest, but that does capture the density of what I want, of people walking these busy streets. There's all sorts of people dressing all sorts of clothes, and of course you have to go look for a target with that, and that's the mood I want to achieve. We might even do things with heavy fogging, which is really cool. Very early, or maybe midnight, you get this fog that goes in the city, makes targeting a little bit difficult, especially if you're a long distance away, and that sets also a very spooky mood. Nighttime, here's the lighting I want to achieve. Like, everything's quite dark. You get spots of light, but you get a lot of shadow area as well. So it's not lit like a real city. Maybe it's lit a lot more moody. So that gives the player opportunity, for example, to hide over here and hide over here, and have spots of light to showcase whatever elements you want to put in front at that light. So that's the kind of lighting I'm pursuing. And even the weather system, this is more of a weather mood, that when it rains or when sun setting, we give it a kind of a spooky vibe versus a kind of a happy epic mood, because I think in this kind of game, that's the kind of mood I want. Yeah, and I'm gonna try to achieve that for my clients and see if they go for it as well. That's what design is. For every one of these, we are taking a gamble. The clients might hate it, but that helps us refine what they don't want. Maybe they be like, see this photo and go, oh, you know what, that's not the mood we want. We want this to be a super happy blue sky kind of sniping game. Okay, fine, that's fine. If that's what they want, then we change the mood board and adopt that kind of design solution to our next round of designs. So for film noir, let's turn that on. And you can see very different in terms of the mood and look and feel. This one, I'm really trying to capture a modern film noir. I want silhouettes, and you can see this one, it's a city. Both of these are city establishing shots, but one is really lit, very happening, very trendy, right? Nightclubs and these kind of things. Whereas this one, you almost have a Blade Runner type of feel to it. It's very, it's almost kind of depressing in a way. It's very moody, it's fogged out. All the buildings are silhouetted. You get a lot of spotlights versus underlighting that you see in this one. This is the lights coming from above and from behind. Yeah, so you're getting that. In terms of subject matter lighting, because you use a silhouette using strong spotlight to light that. Like the sports car here is lit by a stream of light versus a overall pool of light. And I thought that looks beautiful for a game that we're trying to do here. Here's some character interaction, again playing up the film noir, silhouetting the characters in the spotlight. Thought beautiful little reference. And I just put this little car here because I want to capture this feel, this golden era, this everything's finely crafted. And I want to put that in. So you're almost looking at a 1920s, 1930s kind of art direction, but in modern day Paris. And I think that'll be a fun solution to do. And the last one here, just to remind me of weather. The weather system here is like, maybe we make it always raining. It's always wet. It's always kind of damp in this city. So every time you go out, you hear the thunderstorm in the distance, or maybe it's a light rain, and there's a lot of this kind of water. And rain also has a deeper meaning, right? It looks like teardrops. It's a little bit of sadness. It has a little bit of depression. And I think hopefully that plays up with our film noir vibe that we want to achieve for this particular IP. And let's go to the last one, which is our adventure property. Boom. And you can see very different. The color palette is a lot more colorful, a lot more moody, or not moody, a lot more colorful and a lot more vibrant. Because for this one, I want to feel like Indiana Jones. I want to be entertained when I go to a new location, feel like I am Indy. So you can see here the church, the density of this, the lighting is very grand. It's not a moody or depressive lighting. It's a very epic type of inspiring type of lighting. Or we're looking up at high architecture. We have here some golden hour lighting. In fact, all three of these are using golden lighting or golden hour, which is about 5-6 o'clock p.m. or early dawn. That creates a nice sense of looking forward to something, right? Especially in the morning when the sun just coming up, you get this nice feel of something's gonna happen. Or on Sunday evenings, right? For those, you probably all know, like Sundays always feels like Sundays, right? Especially when the sun is setting. You look out your window, it's like, oh man, Sunday's coming to an end. And for some reason, Sundays always feels like that. And I think it has to do with the anticipation of Monday about to come, that something is about to happen. Versus Saturday, you have no work the next day, so you don't feel that kind of, a little bit of sense of pressure, a little bit of butterflies in your stomach. I don't know what it is. Sunday brings on that feeling. So this lighting I'm trying to achieve with that as well. It's like, it is a mystery game, so there's something happening underneath, but the lighting kind of brings or hints at that. It's like, look, it looks really beautiful, but underneath the next hour or two or the next day, something's gonna happen. And so I'm trying to achieve that with this type of lighting. So it looks beautiful, but yet with a hidden message behind it. And here's the marketing in just terms of lighting and the weather and the mood. Is that we're probably not gonna do too much rain and storms like that. We're gonna use sunlight to our advantage. We're gonna use really good shadows to our advantage. And hopefully that achieves a much different look than the ones over here. So now this is just mood boards. None of these, I don't think any of these, none of these I don't think are Paris. They're just moods of random photos I'm taking. And in the real situation, the real job, same thing happens, right? We're using a lot of photos, references, just to put everyone on the same page and put the concept artist onto the same page. So, all right, let me take a break here and we'll move on to the next section, which is the actual references. All right, let me stop the recording and be right back. All right, let's continue. So we just did some moods and look and feel boards. So let's move forward to the actual references, right? Because again, these were not Paris. We're not using these for the actual building of the concept art itself in terms of details and layouts and stuff. For that, we need real world references from the actual locations, in this case, modern Paris. So let's grab some actual references. So the first one is the assassin. And these references, of course, comes from the keywords that we established earlier, like the fancy rooftop bars, high apartment blocks. And for these, you have to grab as many as you can, or how many you need in order to do the concept art. So in this case, I'm gonna grab just 5 as a example. So boom, let's turn it on. So you can see these have no moods in them. There's no good lighting, there's nothing. They're purely used for reference because we have to understand what a Paris apartment possibly look like, or the one you want to do, right? There's many, many different ways to do a Paris apartment. But in this case, I'm gonna use the one that I think that's gonna help this particular IP. So lighting, moods, all that doesn't come into play for these references because they're purely used for visualization. You can see I picked an apartment in Paris here. Here's a roof view with the Eiffel Tower in the back. Here's perhaps a rooftop bar that we mentioned earlier that we could adopt into. Here's just a crowded little bar area that I thought looked really nice, possible good location. And here's a close-up of some of the rooftops that we could be using. So very important, because if we're gonna put this game in Paris, we gotta make sure this stuff stays accurate. We're not making up an alien tower all of a sudden in the middle of Paris. And these are things going back to respecting or working within restrictions. If the game takes place in modern day Paris, you have to follow that client spec. You can't be like, well, I'm just gonna draw a crazy looking military tower in the middle of Paris for no reason. It makes no sense. And the clients, if they see that, they'll be very, very, I think, unhappy to see like, what did you read our spec? You know, this, why is this here? So you have to really follow that spec. So our next one is the film noir one. And this one, I really want to capture the 1920s, 1930s version of Paris, which a lot of it still exists today, like Moulin Rouge is here. Here looks like a fancy restaurant, like some kind of steakhouse is what I'm guessing. But look at that beautiful location, and very different than the other game, the sniper game over here. Here's a car storage area. I thought beautiful, again, going back to the history of Europe. And here's just some nice raining effects that I mentioned earlier. I want this world to always feel like it's wet and it's always raining. So you can zoom in here, just beautiful reflections and the park, the leaves, and see if somehow we can capture that look. And here's another moody, rainy view of Paris as my dog barks in the background. So it just looks really nice, all the splashing of water and so forth. All right, so next one here is gonna be our adventure game. Let's try that on. Hope my dog doesn't show up too much on this recording. Okay, here's the adventure one. So earlier I did mention Notre Dame. Instead of doing the bottom part of Notre Dame where the tourists see, why don't we take another solution to that? And in this case, we're on the rooftop of one of those spires. And you can see the architecture here is very, very interesting. So you have all these nice construction here, you have these platforms. I thought we could do something with this set, perhaps put some lost artifacts up here. The player could come up here on a ladder, it could be all nighttime, right? Pretty cool location that is generally not seen outside of, if you're on a tour, for example, pretty rare. And here's some references for old bookstores. Look how cool these are. Beautiful location, doesn't really work for the other two titles, but for this game, this will be a beautiful setting. In fact, I think Gabriel Knight, I haven't played that game in ages. I think the guy lives in a bookstore or something, right? You open the first screen of the video game starts in that. So anyways, here's another take on the old bookstore, but this one's a little bit more organized, more like it's inside kind of some kind of a mansion or a big building of some kind. It's very tall, but beautiful looking, and we can perhaps integrate the two of them together for our set design. Here are some catacomb references underneath Paris. There's just literally miles and miles of this underneath Paris, and they arrange the bones in very cool patterns. And I thought, look at this set, it'd be beautiful to do something here. Maybe there's some artifacts in the middle, maybe this skull that you see here is important, right? And we built that for our IP, we built from there. And here's just some stuff in the Louvre, right? This is just some photos I found on the internet of some tourist that took a photo, but there's some nice artifacts. You hear some Egyptian artifacts within the Louvre, and using that, we could then take our history into any branch you want. By entering the museum, we could look at the Mayan stuff, we could look at Egyptian stuff, we could look at Roman stuff. It doesn't really matter because the Louvre has all of it. So therefore, we could use that opportunity to meet our clients' needs of, let me see, that's what we're talking about, way back up here, right? Which is learning through entertainment and tying in with ancient history. So the Louvre gives us a very good opportunity. All right, so next phase here is the part that I'm actually gonna draw some really quick stuff. The drawing here is gonna be pretty crappy because I wanna make a point with that. So first, let me just turn it on, right? Now that we have done all of this, let's just do a quick review. We started with a spec, okay, versus starting with nothing and just start to draw. We have a spec, we have 3 different directions, very distinct from each other. We went through what clients are probably going to want for each of these specs, IPs. We wrote down the possible design solutions for each of these. We then established the mood for all of these locations and how to separate them out from each other. We then established real world references to use when we start to sketch. And now we are finally ready to draw. So after all of that, and this in the real world could sometimes take up a week, sometimes two. Here in the school, we have a program called Advanced Diploma, in which our students are enrolled almost like an extension program. And in that one, they spend up to about 2 to 3 weeks not drawing anything. The only thing they're doing is this, and they do a lot of it, writing tons of stuff down, keywords, really getting to feel the IP, and just hundreds of reference images, because they're doing this again every single day, 5 days or 7 days a week, essentially for 2-3 weeks, just gathering references. Because all of it is to gear them that once they start sketching, they are producing assets or concept art that really caters to the IP versus just some generic stuff that they put up on the wall, which is not that fun for us as art directors to see. So now we're finally able to draw. Now I'm gonna do something quite fun here. I'm gonna turn this on, and turn this on. I found some photos of napkins on the internet. I'm putting this here because I want to remind you guys out there that the idea doesn't have to start with a beautiful drawing. The art of napkin sketching has been around forever, but it is getting lost nowadays in the age of Photoshop, that you see young students like, oh, professionals use Photoshop, they use photos, they use all this. That must be the way I do my work as well. And they tend to forget that, look, drawing is a core skill. We all have it. As all concept artists, we all started at some time in our careers drawing on a piece of paper. And even today, as modern as technology is, the napkin sketch has not been lost. In fact, you're still seeing this being done by directors. I'm working on a film right now, actually, in which I have these conference calls with the director every week, and he is literally drawing on a little napkin, little piece of paper that's right in front of the TV. Because that's the way we communicate, because both of us understand that he's not doing this to be published in a book or something. He has a job to do, and that job is to communicate what he wants for the set to me as a designer. So a little napkin sketch goes a long way, because I could read that. He understands it, I understand it. To the public, they might not, and that's where my job comes in, right? I'm gonna take those ideas, do my own little thumbnails there just to show him as well, and using that, we start to get the overall idea down. So I literally put the napkin sketches here to show you that when you sketch, maybe use this to remind yourself, look, it's about the idea. It's not about having a clean presentation right off the bat. It's not necessary to do that. Let's draw on some crappy piece of paper, grab whatever napkin you have around, grab whatever crappy paper you have around, grab a pen, even a cheap one from Office Depot. It doesn't have to be a name branded Pilot high-tech seat, whatever, and just get your idea down. And these drawings, again, are not being seen by the public. It's for yourself. This is not for Facebook, it's not for Twitter. You're not using these to get likes. Get rid of that kind of mindset and really focus on, I'm here to sketch, I'm here to get an idea down. So let's jump in. So I drew some little quick borders just to put on each one. But in terms of drawing itself, I haven't done anything. So what I'll do here is I'll draw really loosely some possible solutions. So this is real time here. So this is let's remind ourselves, this is our assassin game. All right, ooh, a little delay here. This is our film noir. Let's write that down. And this is our little adventure game, right? ADV. All right, so let's draw this really, really fast. So for this one, we have some ideas of, for example, maybe the rooftop of Paris. And when I do my thumbnails, it literally looks like this. Okay, there's not much fundamentals in play. It's about the shot design, it's about the location, because this is kind of like, again, a basketball player dreaming up a play, with his fellow teammates or his coach saying, hey, if we do this, we do that, we do that. That's what it is. All the players know, once the time to come to execute it, they can all execute it. But the grand idea is the first thing. It's like, okay, you dribble to halfway to the court, you turn around, you do a fake, and they pass the ball to him, and then you pass the ball to that guy, and then he shoots. That's what the thumbnail is for. So to clean it, all we gotta do is put the fundamentals back in, the dribbling basketball part in, and we're done. But the idea and the shot and the subject matter is the key, right? So right now I'm just sketching little rooftops, and we're looking at the some references. Now on screen you can't see it, but on my second screen right now, I actually have the references I pulled earlier on here, and I'm kind of combining them together into one. So this one could be, for example, just a rooftop shot. This is a ledge here, and here we can indicate the city skyline of Paris. Down here could be the restaurant that the target is eating at, And here is, for example, your sniper rifle and so forth laying over here to convey the idea of that. Let's do along those lines. Let's do let's do this on a kind of a spooky, almost a stormy day, like a storm's about to come in, right? Something like that. So for this one, let's do the rooftop nighttime shot. Okay, let's do the horizon line right about, let's put it right about here. Let's go this way as well. So we have these tables in here. It's a nightclub, so we have to design this to be pretty neat. So here's maybe the bar right here. And again, with the references that you gather, this is how you use them. Right now, I only have one reference of a nightclub. So if this is a real project, I'll have a lot more. So here's all the drinks. Maybe there's a waterfall in here. Maybe there's a statue. That way we could kind of establish that this is in Paris a little bit, right? Some ancient Gothic statue or something, maybe another one over here, another one over here, bartenders over here, a bunch of patrons sitting over here, people sitting over here, people sitting over here. You can see how loose this is because I'm trying to establish my design, right? And this is the design for a nightclub or a rooftop bar, not a club, right? And you can see, most of you guys probably see this, go, what the heck is going on? What is this? This is what thumbnail is all about. It's like, generally just the creator himself understands what's going on over here, because this is not meant for public consumption or consumption. It's meant for yourself. But I'm putting it here so you guys can sort of see what a thumbnail looks like, right? And this will be a nighttime scene. Perhaps we could put the Eiffel Tower back here as well, right? Way back here, lit up. The Eiffel Tower at nighttime is beautiful. It's got this nice light hitting from the bottom, so we can attach that. And we'll put nice nighttime, some black clouds in there. Maybe we'll put the moon, right? And you, the player, is like in there somewhere, right? But this is the design of the actual bar. Okay. Moving forward over here, let's do the other ones first. Let's do one more, because I don't want to eat up too much time sketching these, but it's not taking too long. Let's do an apartment. Let's do a French apartment. So I'll look at the reference real quick and just see how that's built, and then we'll move our furniture around accordingly. So I'm gonna put a fireplace here versus a wall, right? And this we could grab from reference. Let's put a carpet over here, all right? We'll hang a classic painting here, and on both sides of these we'll have a window. It's a sniping game after all. A window here. We'll put a window here. Let's run these windows more down to the floor, like the reference has. Right, we're gonna need some curtains. So not to be suspicious, the player has the curtains all open. Let's put some furniture here, some furniture there. Right, outside is the skyline of Paris. And some buildings. The target is a building that's way, way far away, 900,000 meters away. Okay, let's put a sofa here. And in this case, because we have to design, we're not just drawing a Paris living room, there's a purpose for it. I'm gonna take a sofa and put it upside down. All right, like here. Put a couple pillows, put a little table. So he's got into this apartment and kind of messed around with the furniture a bit to set up his little sniper hide. All right, so it's gonna flip a sofa and use that as a platform, and we'll put like some high power rifle right over here. Right, and that's a stage for that. And he's got some of his backpack, equipment. He might have a little laptop. So it's a little staging point here. Okay, a little chair right here. Gotta put a chandelier in here. So pretty expensive apartment. Right, so that's this set. So okay, that's a cool little set. And last one, let's go back up to see. I forgot what some of the other sets were. So let me scroll back up. So we got Large Winery, Abandoned Castle. Abandoned Castle would be pretty cool. How many blocks? I don't have reference for it in this case. See, there's no castles here. Well, let's do this. Let's do like a little bar scene on the street, right? Like a winery or something like that. So do that. Little buildings, right? Looking at the reference, right? We're not copying the reference or using it to get the real world designs, right? To mix it in. Another street, right? Some very French era buildings. Little village. Maybe we'll put a fountain here, which we could get from reference. We could use a real one as well. Right. The older part of Paris, like an old medieval village, essentially. Nice change of scenery. People, umbrellas. Umbrellas here. This is a edge of a street, and This is probably the first time you're seeing me do really, really rough stuff. And that's something I want to show you guys. Is like concept art is not about having pretty stuff all the time. There's a lot of this kind of stuff goes on behind the scenes. It just happened not to get printed in art books, and people who generally draw don't upload these either. They're sometimes hidden. So for someone who's learning, it could be frustrating when you go online. All you see is just polished concept art and not see some of these rough stuff, which is actually a huge amount of the work is like this behind the scenes, right? Napkin sketches, right? So that's our little street scene. Got a little fountain squirting water over here, people walking around, and you have some guys having a coffee over here, maybe some mob boss or something like that. They have a little table here, they have a bodyguard maybe standing right over here, and another bodyguard standing over here. They're holding, they don't have guns, it's the public, so, but that's a scene. And then you as the player is like right there somewhere in some building few blocks away. All right, so there's that one. So now let's go back to our film noir, right? For this set, we want to do, like, for example, a restaurant. So, or let's do the Moulin Rouge, right? A nice little set. Now we change the pace. Now, typically, we're only working on one of these. We're not doing all three of these, right? I'm only doing this as an example of how different the design solutions are if you have an IP set in the same location. That's just to make a point. But most of the cases, the timing of that would be almost impossible, in which you're working on 3 different IPs and it happen to take place in the same location. So, all right, there goes my dog again. So let's full on route. So here's a stage. Here's a little mic, curtains, more curtains. Little stage, bunch of audience seats, curve it all the way up, right? So it's not exactly Moulin Rouge, but it's very close to it. It has very similar vibe, but we might have to change the spacing, add some other stuff in there just to get that theater across. Maybe some lights over here. I'll put the band over here. This is the stage, right? A bunch of seats, bunch of little tables, candles on each one. Little stand, little outside area, right? Maybe some kind of chandelier coming from the bottom, top. So we have this nice set. Right, people walking around. All right, what other set do we have? We have like, like an old mansion or something like that, or even just a restaurant. Let's do a one-point shot. Here's a table. Some patrons sitting here having their steak. Another table over here, people sitting having their steak, some guy over here, right? And maybe we could try to put a murder scene into this one. So maybe this one, the cabaret girls got murdered or something, and she's over here. It's a crime scene. It's modern, so we gotta make sure that this is not a 1920s crime scene. So a police tape, bunch of detectives over here. Maybe they put a couple of lights on it. Lights, lights, lights. Some police tape. Stuff like that. A lot of police guys standing around, detectives standing around. All right, so this one, if it's a crime scene, I guess the patrons would be gone. They wouldn't be here. But we have the leftovers of their stuff, like the steak is left uneaten. Maybe there's a shooting here, something like that. So people left in a hurry. Let's do something quite cool. I'm gonna introduce like a fish tank, aquarium inside this restaurant where they hold, the lobsters and stuff like that. Make it very classical, so it looks really cool. And we borrow the designs from the reference. So you have this nice golden archway, and above it is this huge aquarium. But during the shootout, it got damaged. And this is where designs comes in. It creates interesting sets. You're entertaining your audience. Here's another archway, and we could do this. Is really fun stuff. Let me draw this part out here. And I'm just thinking this on the spot as I sketch for you guys right now. So it's kind of fun, actually. This is as real time as it gets. All right. So here we could put out the water. So the floor is just all wet. That'd be really neat. And maybe if the particle system is good, we can even simulate a thin layer of water as you walk across, and there's like floating stuff. And then we can have all these lobsters living around, crawling out. And then the guy who got shot is like right over here. So he's half wet, he or she half wet, covering the aquarium water, and a couple of lobsters crawling on him. Some dead fish. Here's also some police tape, and you got detectives out here. That could be a window, and here we can hint, right? That could be a window right here. And here we can hint at the police lights. This is film noir, so I want to use a lot of silhouette. So this fish light tank will be lit through this window this way. So we get a nice blue haze going through this window this way to silhouette this entire scene. There's an arc right here, and that'll silhouette our dead body being lit by the police lights from the outside, and the whole scene is raining. I think this will make a beautiful little set right here. All right, so what else do you want to do? Let me go back up to check. Let's see, restaurant, classic car dealership, on board a train. That'd be kind of cool. I don't have a train reference, but let me just sketch one from memory real quick, right? But this is where your references become very, very important. So we have a little train. This is the upper shot, horizon lines up here. Window, right? Window, you can see the attention to fundamentals is not there. Once I have the idea, man, we just start a new drawing and get our fundamentals in there. Right, so it's a train cart, little chandelier looking things. Here's one over here. We're looking down. This is the entrance to the train. So we could have, here's the link to the next cart. Maybe let's make this a little bigger. Little window right there. We have all the cops standing over here. Outside is a station. We have maybe other trains and a bunch of detectives standing around as well. We might have a crime scene here. In this case, would you have another murder or something like that? Maybe the body's been removed at this point, so it's just a chalk line on the floor. And then a bunch of clues. Stuff on the table. This might be a lounge. Let's make it a smoking lounge. Bunch of chairs. All right, cigars, magazines, bunch of stuff. And people also ran out of this one when the shooting occurred, so we have a lot of clues and junk everywhere. Lights from the ceiling. All right, this will be our little train set. Let's write that down. Train. All right, then we got one more over here. Let's do the classic car dealership. It'd be quite cool. Let's do a really low angle shot. I can see this shot being all the lights are turned off in the dealership, and it just gets some silhouette from the windows. So every single car is just silhouetted. You know, make a beautiful shot. So all these cars, classic cars, right? Great opportunity to put some cars that are generally not in the spotlight into this game. Especially these early French period cars. There's some really nice designs during that time. So classic cars, right? All lined up in the dealership. Let's do a close-up one for scale. Let's not do that. Let's do the bumper. More cars, more cars, more cars. And then it's all lit by some factory lighting. Girders on the ceiling. Rafters, I guess. And then we got some windows along the sides. And that's going to provide our lighting. And it's raining outside, really heavy rainstorm going on with flashes of lightning. And every time the lightning hits, we'll light the inside a little bit more, and you see all these silhouettes, right? And this could be a action scene because we are talking about a mix of early noir with Mass Effect, so there will be some shooting scenes in this. So this could be a scene in which you're chasing down a bad guy, and you have a gunfight in this area. And if this is a modern gate, next gen, we could do some really cool stuff here, like breaking all the glass of the windows and the headlights and all that kind of stuff. All right, so this is that one. This is my dealership. All right, so you can see the little thumbnail, and this is what my thumbnails in real life looks like, right? I really like the idea of having napkins. Look quite cool. And then of course our last one is our adventure game, right? The Louvre one, for example, the catacomb, the bookstores. So I'll just do a few. I think let's see, our time is eating into a lot over here, but let me just draw a few. Okay. If these episodes run long, then hopefully it's okay to some of you guys. Seems like a lot of you guys preferred it, so we'll do a few more. It's definitely easier for me to record these because I don't have to worry about compressing things down to a half an hour and fitting a bunch of text or audio into that set amount of time. Just draw, right? So this is a top Notre Dame, which I'm getting from reference. But on this one, I'll have like some storage that they never opened. This is a click adventure game, so you have to climb up here. You have here's your main character, who she is, to be decided. And you got some unopened crates and shipments that's been sitting there. It's draped, It's been sitting there since like World War II or something, you know. And one of these is open, and something's been taken from it, or maybe that's something you have to retrieve. You have to have a flashlight, so we'll do this as a flashlight scene and create all these nice silhouettes and shadows here. All right, so there's that. There's our rooftop shot. Let's do an old bookstore. So here your mission is to find, where you go is to find some book, right? Let's do like a typewriter or a really old cash register right there. Some old lady working the register, and just book after book after book. Let's put a little bigger. Lots of weird artifacts everywhere, right? What makes these bookstores cool is that not just books, but they have gadgets and statues and all sorts of stuff everywhere. And just this maze. All these are books. That's a close-up foreground. All right, go inside there. More books. More books in there. All right. Let's do so that one's really quick, but it's a little book shot. So here's the cash register with the lady. Here's a foreground, and then this is the depth of the bookstore. So you can see just layers and layers of shelves as we go into the background there. Next one, let's do the catacombs. Let's do like a sacrifice area. We'll take the reference as our base. And you walk into this room. It's lying like a cylinder. These shots actually could be designed exactly for the actual game, because these two previously are most likely 3D games, or they are 3D games, in which the player could control the camera. In a game like this, you could actually lock the camera off. A lot of adventure games do that, so that way you don't confuse the player on what they're supposed to look at, right? So you go into a scene, it is a lock shot, like a film, but it is still built in 3D. So the composition that you draw for these could actually be used for the real production of the product. So we'll clean this up, right? We'll have a good concept art for it, and then the 3D modelers and the texture artists and lighters, they'll sometimes actually just match exactly what you drew in terms of the camera angles itself. All right. I'm gonna add a lot more bones to this. So there's a circular bone structure like the reference, but we're gonna make it a little more entertainment by putting like some lights around it. And this is an entertainment thing. It's not real life. Just like you go and play a game and you go into a cave or something that's been abandoned for like 100 years, but for some reason the torches are lit. You know, that's just game logic. One of those things that you make it too real is not fun either. So in this case, you stumble upon this ancient area, but for some reason there's like some lit candles, right? And maybe this skull here is the key. Let's put it like Dante's skull, you know. All right, let's put it right there. And that's something you have to retrieve or solve or insert a key, something like that, as these adventure games tend to do. All right, so I have this set. Underground. Some of you guys probably been here. It's really cool. If you haven't, next time you guys take a trip to Paris, take a stop at the catacombs. It's an area that a lot of tourists tend to skip because it's not advertised as much, but it's really, really interesting. But if you're claustrophobic, it could be a little spooky. Some of these tunnels are only about 4 feet tall, so you have to really almost get on your knees and crawl through them. It's quite spooky, actually. All right, so that's that. I really like this shot. That's cool. This is my catacomb shot. All right, last one here. Let's go back up. I tend to forget what. Oh, the Louvre, right? If it's the Louvre, we could do all sorts of stuff. Let's just do one more shot to finish this section off. Let's do Egyptian sarcophagus. All right, here's sarcophagus standing on the ground. These are big ones, right? Big sarcophagus, like a coffin thing, but still vertically. So it's there. Let's put another one over here. And this could even be not exactly how the Louvre displays it, but we're gonna take place there and design the room for what we need to do. So we have these 4 statues, bookmarking or bookending the main coffin here. Let me zoom in a bit. All right, so here's like King Tut or something like that, the focal point. Right, here's a spotlight that's going to hit that from the glass window from above. So we lit this in a nice blue light. some other displays. So we're not in Egypt here. This is actually a museum, so we gotta make sure that we put some displays cases and those type of stuff. And really cool to actually put some real objects in there, like real world, like what this client wants, like these little display objects from Egypt are actually the real deals, modeled in 3D. That'll be really cool. And then you could put some plaques over here that the player could actually read and learn some stuff, like real facts about those objects. All right, so there's all like hieroglyphics over here, right? So you have to like open it and retrieve the ring of like King Tut or whoever's buried over here, or mummified, not buried, mummified. Anubis dogs holding staffs. All right, so that's our little museum shot. Little display cases, all glass, and it's a Louvre at night, so you're kind of sneaking in there to do this. Your friend works there or something in the story. She helps turns off the alarm, or maybe he's a security guard. The security guard helps you and he disables everything, because this is way more important than you stealing something maybe. So this is more about solving a crime, who knows, or solving some kind of ancient mystery. So right, so that's that one. So this is pretty cool. This is a nice little museum shot here, right? And this is what you do. So once you have this, then it's up to you to clean this up and clean it and paint it and do whatever you want. So let me stop this and do one more section. We'll call this done. All right, and I'm back. And so for the last part of this episode, so far we have gone through the various stages of conceptual art and concept design, how to plan it. So last part, of course, is presentation and cleanup, right, which is written right over here. Now for this episode, I'm not going to clean these up because it'll take forever, and you could get that from other episodes as well, in terms of how to take something like this, construct it perfectly, draw it really well, light it, paint it up. It's up to you. But I'll show you some examples that I've done myself for our students here that uses very same concept, in which we're painting to spec, we're designing to spec versus painting randomly, right? So I'll show you a couple examples, and hopefully that helps you guys, and we'll call this episode to an end. So first one I'll show you guys is this one here. Let me zoom in. So this is based on Faldor's Farm from the David Eddings book. So it's a book I read when I was a kid. I read this in probably late 80s or early 90s. I can't recall. One of my favorite book series. Very traditional role-playing game type of setting. You got everything that you have traditionally in an RPG setting. It's on here, but I love it. And this is based on the description of where the young boys starts, or where the story actually starts, which is this guy's farm. And we have to use the same stuff because this farm has a lot of specs that if we're designing this into a video game or a film, we have to follow those specs. And some of those specs, for example, are things like there's a blacksmith that lives on this farm, there's a really big kitchen, it has a certain amount of floors with people living in it, it has a tower, it has a gate. And the book describes all this, but it doesn't tell you exactly how it is laid out. It doesn't tell you exactly the architecture that's being used. That's our job. Our job is to interpret those words with reading comprehension skills and show our clients what the visual of these, what this book that David Eddings is describing, what could that possibly look like? And this is just one idea, right? We have to pitch many ideas, but this is what I mean by designing to spec versus designing to, or just drawing for the sake of drawing. All right, next one is my take of the Shire from The Hobbit. So I did this for our students on purpose because they were like, hey, for something like the Shire, it's been done so many times. J.R. Tolkien, Alan Lee, talking about PJ over at Weta. There's many versions of the Shire, but that doesn't mean that if you work on Lord of the Rings film and they don't have the film license or the video game license that EA has, for example, that you're done. It's like, oh, I can't design the Shire because those guys have already done it. No, it doesn't mean that. It just means those are their take of Tolkien's words. You could also do your own take on those words, because these words can be interpreted in many ways. There are certain things that cannot be changed, like the circular door, the gold knob. That's established in the Tolkien books, but he doesn't at one point precisely describe you exactly what the Shire looks like precisely where this is here, this is exactly here, this is exactly here. It's not. It's up to interpret. And also for entertainment, you don't have to follow those words exactly either. It's for what you want to do. You see the PJ version takes it into a very kind of realistic way. You see the video game version, like the RTS version that EA did, it makes it a little more gamey, but it's the same location. So I did this as an example of, if I happen to jump on a Lord of the Rings game and we have to do the Shire, well, we cannot copy PJ, we can't copy EA, we gotta do our own version. And this is my take on it, using the circle as the main design motif. So still retain the golden knob and all that, right? And this is painted off the description. Remember something like there's a hole in the ground, it's not a dirty, muddy, something like that, very clean, right? Those are tokens words, and we start using that as our building block. Next, we have my take of a street scene from probably one of my favorite books, Neuromancer, William Gibson book. So I read that book periodically whenever I'm in a cyberpunk mood. I'll tend to read that book. I just love the setting. Obviously a little bit Blade Runner-ish, but it has a little bit of a cybernetic. I don't know what word that I'm looking for here, but it's a cyberpunk world. So I love the blue, the technology, the computer, the screens, the old CRTs, all that. So this is my take of a Neuromancer street, that what I imagine it to be based on the descriptions of William Gibson. Next will be another take on a book. Notice so far these are all taken from books. So that way, that's our client, and that's the spec we're trying to meet. So this one is taken from one of my favorite authors, China Midville, which Perdido Street Station, I mentioned before. This is taken from another book of his as an inspiration point, is a book called The Scar, in which the story takes place where your lead character is on a ride on a boat. I think the boat is not that big, but this is basically my interpretation of what that boat looks like. It's like a boat that carries slaves and all sorts of cargo and things like that. China Midville world is very, very interesting to me. So this is my take on what possibly could that design look like if it was realized into a movie or video game. Right, and all of them, you can see the rough sketch on the corner. Put that there on purpose. Okay, next will be another take on Neuromancers. Again, you can probably figure out I love the book Neuromancer. This would be like a nightclub scene that I could see taking place if there's a video game made of Neuromancer. What could a nightclub in that game possibly look like? And so this is my take of that. You got either Hong Kong out there, or Singapore, or Tokyo, one of those metropolis cities, and designed this really cool nightclub into that kind of scene. You got digital 3D projections of strippers and laser lights, these projection screens everywhere, the city landscape out there, just this kind of a cyberpunk view of the future. Next will be this is the first one that's not based on the book, but based on a design spec that I've written for our students, which is to design a bounty hunter bar. So in this case, the spec was written by me, and I wrote out a few paragraphs, and the students have to design within those specs. So in this case, this is a bounty hunter for like dragons and stuff. So that's why there's all these swords and stuff being hung, and you can see all these weapons being hung over here. That's meant to represent that all the warriors that fell or died when they're trying to hunt certain kind of bounties, then their weapons are displayed, and this is one of the dragons that they killed, for example, and they're displaying its skeleton at this bar. So all the bounty hunters and all these kind of missionary guys and stuff like that, mercs, I guess, right, are meeting here to get the latest bounty. So that was the design spec that we had to follow. A few more, then we'll call this done. This is again based on another book. This is based on I Am Legend. Really, really good book. If you haven't read it, check it out. It is one of the first books to deal with kind of the zombie apocalypse. In this case, it's dealing with vampires, but that book really was one of the first books to deal with a outbreak of disease, I guess, in a way, and how that affects human society. So in this case, even though this is a post-apocalyptic type of setting, remember earlier when we started the video, I talked about adding details that are story driven versus adding detail for the sake of adding detail. So in this case, I'm following the book. The details are described to help story. So you can see here, because this book has to do with vampires and a single guy named Neville who lives in this 1950s looking house, there's a few things you have to cater to that is part of the story. For example, the water tower. This is described in the book. This is how he gets his water, right? So we have to insert that in there. We have to insert the fact that they're vampires, so he puts mirrors on his front door to prevent it, right? Keep in mind, this book is written in the 50s, so very, very, very early interpretation of this kind of stuff in terms of what we read in the current day. So in that time, he's still putting mirrors, right? So you can see there's a mirror, it's cracked, he put on the front door, described in the book. Lots of crosses, also described in the book. So these are details added there to further enhance the story. That this post-apocalyptic setting wouldn't really fit if you put it into, for example, The Last of Us, which is also a post-apocalyptic game, but they don't have vampires in their game, so they don't have this kind of detail. It doesn't make any sense. So there's that, and of course, he hangs garlic everywhere, right? Another thing that vampires supposedly hate. So all around his property, he's stringing garlic everywhere, fresh garlic, and you can see it's all around his driveway, garlic hanging over here. And right now I'm actually showing him having a cigarette and pulling a string of garlic around his property. And I also chose him to dress him in a suit, as a time period, the 1950s. Men at that time typically dress in a suit and wears a hat, right? So in this case, he's lost his hat, but he still got his suit. And all these details were added because of the spec. It wasn't random. It wasn't like I just want to paint a random post-apocalyptic scene. It has a very specific story it needs to cater to. So, and that's what this scene was. And last two to go, and we'll call this quits. This one also based on the book, Sleepy Hollow, which is the Tim Burton film made of it as well, but it's a really classic book. You got the the writer with the headless rider with the pumpkin head, right? So this is a take of what would Sleepy Hollow look like if I were working on a property for example, video game. And there's another case in which details is added to help tell a story. So in this case, I try to make the trees look all creepy, like they're almost living claws. They grow like fingers, as you can see over here. Try to capture that, and that's part of the design scheme. Even the way the roofs are built, I try to make a skull in here, right? So you can see here it looks like the eyes, and these are the teeth of the skull, by building the windows to mimic it's not a direct skull, because that's too much. You look at it, go, why would they build it look like a skull? It's a subliminal message to say that this village is kind of creepy. So you look at it, there's no face, but you maybe hopefully sense that there's some kind of skeleton thing going on. And also use the asymmetry everywhere. Nothing is symmetrical. The streets are going different directions. The door is not centered to the building. The tower is not centered to the building. And these are all design decisions I made as I was doing this demo for our students to try to describe how you could design the major shapes as well as the details to help tell the overall story. In this case, being very, very creepy. So, and also made it rain. So it's nice and wet, foggy, kind of creepy. And all that plays up with our IP. And the last one I'll show you guys is not a piece of concept art, but something kind of related, which is storytelling using mood. And this is a mood board that I've done as a single painting. Let's go all across to represent Christopher Columbus as he traveled from Europe into the Americas. So this is 5 frames showing you that. You can see here, frame number 1 is them departing at nighttime, so all their sails are wrapped up. So again, details that help tell a story. I also set this up as a nighttime scene that they're having a drink. All the sailors are just getting drunk and stuff like that before they sail off the next day. Next frame, they're sailing by the Canary Islands off of Spain. So you can see that they're sailing into danger, the unknown. So I'm trying to build the last grand lighting here. You see the epic golden lighting hitting the sails here. Very peaceful, very calm. But you see that the edge on the right side here, they're about to go into a storm because it is trying to say they're going into the unknown. Front number 3 is now going into the Atlantic Ocean, the most dangerous part of the journey, crossing the ocean. So you can see the storms going on, the sky is red, the ships are no longer being lit epically. Now it's very, very spooky. They're also off center. You can see this guy's center point here, here, and here. So they're all shaking back and forth, trying to build a sense of tension. After they survive that journey, they finally make it into the Americas. The Bahama Islands. So you can see here, I'm cleaning up this rainstorm, and now they're sent to this beautiful blue sky, a untouched land, right? So it's very, very clean, it's pristine, basically no artificial lighting, and I did that on purpose. Whereas here, it's an industrial lighting. All the people are here have conquered this part of the world. You got a lot of introductions of artificial lights, even though it's candles, but it looks man-made. Here, no architecture, no buildings except for the boat. So these guys are definitely seen as the foreigners coming into this pristine landscape. And the last frame here is them departing the Bahamas on the island. And you can see a native kind of looking at them. And here I'm using a warm orange lighting to bookend the orange lighting here. Whereas here it's being created by mankind. This is lighting done by man. This is the red of the earth, trying to kind of bookend the introduction of industrialization and mankind versus the natural red of the earth itself. Because there's some buried information I want to put here, which is that when Columbus came to this part of the world, it wasn't exactly a good thing for the natives, right? They got enslaved, they did all this bad stuff to them. So I didn't want to show this as the epic, like a hero showing up to the Bahamas and discovering America or something like that. And this is part of the story I try to tell to our students with these paintings, just in case that's what the clients wanted as well. So even for this, what I did is as soon as they sail into harbor, their sails go up, they're kind of coming off the little boats, and I put a rainstorm, as you can see, behind the ships. This is kind of a foreshadowing, a hidden message to say that these guys are not exactly good, right? They're bringing a sense of darkness with them into this pristine landscape. So the lighting is only here that I put here, kind of like sunlight, whereas back here, you can see here, all in shadow, to kind of foreshadowing the bad things that are to come. But this is also painted to spec. So the concepts here in terms of lighting, the color palette, was all meant to tell a story, all meant for the IP. So anyways, hopefully this summarizes a little bit of the design process, or at least part of it. Going forward, episode 85, I'll probably talk about some other aspects of concept art, even bringing up, I think, some of the past concept art for you guys to study, to really understand what this industry is. Because if you guys want to work in this business, then you have to really know the pipeline and also really like the process, because this is going to be perhaps the next 20-30 years of your life doing this. So hopefully this episode helps you guys understand and see a little bit of the behind the scenes of what goes on for us day in and day out working as concept artists. So anyways, if you have questions, leave it on the comment section, and I thank you guys so much again for your support and watching our episodes. Please subscribe, and I generally don't mention subscribe, but I do know that by subscribing, YouTube do put our videos, for example, as suggested videos and those type of things. So it does help more people hopefully to find these episodes. So until next time, thanks again, and I will see you guys in episode 84. Thanks guys, bye bye.